Well, I just wanted to start off saying thanks for having me tonight. It's such a pleasure for me to come and speak to you all. I put together some slides and some visuals. I tried to incorporate all the interview questions, which were great, by the way. But if y'all have any questions as I go through that, just speak up or raise your hand. This is really for you all. So if there's something I'm missing, just stop me or go ahead and ask that. Otherwise, we'll dive right into it. So, nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Jacklyn Ady. I'm the Director of New Product Development and Design for Versteel. We're a high-quality solutions manufacturer of design-forward American-made furnishings for working and learning environments, and we are primarily a metal fabrication company. We got our start organically, actually making parts and pieces for a lot of our competitors, and grew into making furniture, like I mentioned, organically. We use a lot of Italian designers, so if you look on our website, you'll see a lot of European influence in there. So I'll answer a couple of questions about my background. Probably like many of you, this is how design started off for me. I love painting, I love making things, I love doing art. I originally started off at DAAP in fine arts and was leaving studio about 4:30 one night, and my father called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" Because he was getting up for work, being the good corporate citizen he is. I said, "I'm walking home from studio." And he says, "No, what are you doing with your life? What are you going to do? How are you going to make money? How are you going to turn this into a career?" And at that point, he was really pushing me to look into doing graphic design or something around that sort. My mom is trained as a nurse and was a RN for 35 years. And my dad is an aeronautical engineer, worked for GE for 42 years, and really wanted me to find kind of a more straightforward career path. And I was like, not selling my soul to the devil, I'm not giving up art. But I took his advice, and thank goodness I did. Went around to a lot of different studios, went to a couple graphic design studios, and said I didn't really want to sit in front of a computer all day long, but my cat may come and say hello today. Went into an ID studio, and they were making monoliths in one of the foundation classes, and I loved the way they were using their hands and working with the medium. I said, that's something I could do for the rest of my life. So I applied for one of two transfer spots. So I actually switched to ID after my first year at DAAP, and got one of those spots with my very good friends that I'm still good friends with today, and ended up finding extra time in my schedule because I had an extra year, as my parents love to call the victory lap year, doing other things that I loved at school. So what I did is I took a lot of business classes, I took a lot of marketing classes. That's something that I really had a lot of passion for. And I found that I looked forward to all of those classes. I found that those were like my favorite nights of the week because it wasn't that they were easy for me, but I got to use my creative thinking in a different way. And that's how I found out that that was something that was really good and inherently in me. So the question about, this transition from design to design business and leadership role is I did a lot of continuing education, and I've done non-design leadership roles pretty much my whole life. So in high school and college, I was always a captain. I was the first female president of the water ski team. I did a lot of different nonprofit positions that I would serve in leadership roles. For me, I went on to do my MBA while I was living in Japan. So that gave me a totally different perspective on how I look at design. But you certainly can work up organically in different design roles to that pinnacle. For me, it was really continuing education and a lot of nonprofit leadership roles. So a typical day for me is never the same. I am typically feet on the ground running. As soon as I get into work, I'm checking in with all my engineers. I'm checking in with all my guys in tool and die. I'm checking in with manufacturing. I manage from when the idea comes from the designer to getting it on paper, to getting it into the models, to getting the models to prototypes, to getting the prototypes into hands, to getting feedback, to adjusting, to working with manufacturing and production to make sure that we are hitting our cost targets and we are doing it in a way that's using our capabilities in manufacturing as well. So my day is really around supporting all those around me and working cross-functionally. And I think a lot of the work experience I have had in the past really shaped the way I approach my work at Versteel. I lived in Japan for almost 3 years, and when I got there, I joined a nonprofit, ended up leading that nonprofit as well, and learned a lot about cross-cultural collaboration. there is this interesting phenomenon in Japanese culture where you have to read the feeling in the air. We use a lot of words in our American tone to explain things, whereas you have to really pick up on the little things. And so for me, I became a really good listener from that experience. And I also realized how many different cultures that we bring in our diverse backgrounds when we all come to work. So that's one of the biggest things that I got from that experience. A couple of my tips on intern and interviewing. My biggest pet peeve is when people don't email me back. And if I email you and say, hey, I saw that you applied for the job, would you like to set up an interview, and you've already accepted a position, just let me know. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I just am trying to close that loop. So even if you are kind of in between and you're not really sure, give me an email back and let me know what's going on, so I'm not counting on you, because typically I'll try to email people and get an interview landed in that first week. I'll try to make that second shortlist in the second week, and I'll try to make a decision because we want to move through that quickly. One of the things that I've learned myself is that, in a phone interview, there's no body language. If your Wi-Fi is lagging, something like that's also going on. So I typically let the phone call interviewer lead the conversation instead of trying to lead it myself. And if they ask you to explain something or walk through something in your portfolio, that's a great place for you to take and run, but always let them lead the conversation. As far as interning, I really love the idea of getting a good fit on both sides. One of the biggest things I learned in my professional life is that some roles look really great, but they don't feel really great. And I think that's associated with maybe a title that looks really good, or a company that looks like it'd be really great to work at, and then you get in and the feel isn't super great. So I think when you're doing your interviews, you just want to be honest and authentic. If you can right now, it's great to show any kind of resiliency. Nick and I were chatting before our call today, and he was talking about someone who had an interview that they lost the Wi-Fi and they had to readjust. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking if you can adapt, because that's going to be the biggest skill moving forward post-COVID, is if you're resilient and can adapt to change quickly. And the other thing I like to mention is, if you're really wanting a job and you really want to know about next steps, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, what are the next steps? Or do you have any reservations or questions that I can answer for you now before I get off the phone call? So furniture, what does the design process look like for furniture design, and how to integrate sustainability? For me, it always starts with that big brainstorm, and typically I'll run, 15, 20 brainstorms throughout the life of a project. We never call it a brainstorm, but a lot of times we'll hit a challenge and we'll look at it as an opportunity to readjust and see how we can make those changes. A lot of what I look at too is taking action. I love this quote about vulnerability, because if you haven't watched The Call to Courage on Netflix, it's an awesome one. No innovation without failure, no creativity without vulnerability. For me, one of the biggest things about my job is that I create safe spaces for my people to shout out crazy ideas, to come up with wild stories, to get those crazy things down on paper, and us start fooling around with what they're actually going to look like in real life. And that's the thing that I'm really good at, is either by little tips and tricks that I've learned over the years, is I can bring people into a room that can have all these diverse backgrounds, and I can get them on the same page together and try to take away some of the hierarchy that may be outside of that room, but to get them to that place where they can offer up those crazy ideas, which is a lot of practice and a lot of preparation. Now, this is not my diagram. I steal this from IDEO's Innovation Sweet Spot. But typically, I just want to give you a visual how I look at projects that we have coming in. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of Italian designers that do design for us. We have a lot of organic design too. Our versatile design team is very strong. You may know one in your class as well. But what I look for is, can we make it? Does the market want it? What are they going to pay for it? What's the value around it? Does it make sense for our business? All those things go into those decision-making skills. And I do a lot of project management. So this is like an Asana, it's a Monday.com. A lot of times I'll track different projects through different parts of it. And my process looks similar to your kind of basic process of product development that you go through for any project. You do the research, you do the ideation, you get into a concept phase, you refine, you test, repeat, refine, retest, repeat, you finalize. But in furniture design, a lot of what happens, I think the nitty gritty is in that refine and finalization, because to get it to a commercial stance, it's really good if you can get some hands-on feedback. This is one of our Sky Wellness stations that actually Nick worked on while he was with us. And once we got it into the hands of people, that kind of changed how we wanted to finalize that product and little tweaks that we could have made. A lot of times we'll play with these bad boys. We'll do a brainstorm at 8 a.m. We'll come up with an idea. We'll print something up. We'll weld it up. Our prototype expert will put it together. You know, we try to make as many things as possible to prove out those designs very early on. And that helps us get to that finalization phase faster. So the faster that we can prototype, you know, whatever version that is, the faster we can get to something that's really valuable in the end. As far as sustainability, this is a good project for us to talk about. This is our latest line of occasional tables called Geometrics. And it actually came from an idea I had of using scrap corian that we had sitting in our plant. So, you know, when we think about sustainability, we always want to think about materials, right? If you can take things apart, if you can recycle them. A lot of times we put together assembly instructions and disassembly instructions. So when that product hits that final era of its life, you can take it apart and recycle the pieces. But what I've been taking a spin on is, you know, the materials we use itself, have they already been recycled once before? This product is actually 9.8% all recycled materials. Corian is already recycled in different bits and components, and then the particle board that's underneath is all recycled as well. And those can be recycled once again, and so that product lifetime is a lot longer than some other ones. And they can be used in different ways. One of the things I love about this project is the cross collaboration we did with manufacturing. We actually came up with this really cool way that you actually route out the top of this table, so you see about 3 millimeters, and then you can send an electric charge through without a phone that looks like this. And I think that's a really good kind of teaching moment of showing like what I do in design leadership is working cross-functionally to come up with those really cool innovative things, because they all happen when design, engineering, and manufacturing come together. That's where the magic really happens. And the other way I like to look at sustainability is in what the product's being used for. So, you know, with COVID, I'm so afraid we're going to get to the end of this year, wherever it may be, and look at mounds and mounds of acrylic that are all in the dump. And so for us, we learned how to cut acrylic on our current machines using our capabilities, but we're a metal fabrication company at our heart and soul. And so, you know, when we make business decisions, we want to make them that uses our plant and uses our manufacturing processes in a good way, is attractive to the customer, is valuable to the customer. But this product, we actually tapped into a little bit of a different era, because instead of just having acrylic boxes around everybody, we offered another alternative of, you know, a powder coated metal. We found this really cool dry erase powder coat that we incorporated into our line. So now it's not just one thing. It serves as a vertical work surface. Yeah, it separates people and it gives that barrier for that COVID protection. But now people can hang up their pictures or their notes. They can do a little note. We worked with a local printing company that also did some really cool funky prints for us. But then you can write on them and do something else. So, you know, the trend that I see coming out of furniture design is that people are demanding more and more flexible and adaptable spaces. So no longer will a product be able to do only one thing. It's going to have to do 2, 3, 4, you know, a multiple of things to actually be really valuable to people anymore. And I think what's going to be interesting about seeing how we work and learn in the future is that it seems from my research and my experience of talking to people now is that we're really going to find a hybrid atmosphere. And it's not going to be all at home. It's not going to be all in the office. It's probably going to be 1 or 2 days from home that you really get that heads down work. And then 2 or 3 days in the office that you come in. And what we refer to it as is that destination worthy, amenity based atmosphere. So you're coming into the office to use the printer, any supplies you need. You're coming in to collaborate with your coworkers to get that really great energy from each other. So I think we're going to see more and more demand for adaptability in those products because they're going to have to serve more than one thing. What do I think about design leadership that I wish I would have known in school? Like I mentioned before, a lot of what I do is cross-functional collaboration. You know, the studios that you do with Live Well and those cross-functional studios with like engineering or fashion or nursing or whatever it may be are really pivotal to your professional development. And you really need to do as many of those as you can if you're interested in something like that. So the other question about integrating design and business in my leadership role, it's really just my day-to-day. I mean, everything I do, I'm thinking about that. I may not ever carry the title of industrial designer again, but I'm inherently always going to be a designer. And typically, any interview I go to, any place that I go to, that's the background that I carry with me, and that's the heart of who I am as a professional. Business is what I've built and I've learned over the years and with my experience, and so I always try to keep up with both. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of competitive and non-competitive research as far as design and business. So it's almost like my workload is just bigger as far as watching both industries at the same time. And for me, like I mentioned, I organically came to leadership because of a lot of non-design opportunities. You know, I held a leadership role in my sorority during school, was president of the water ski team and captain in recruitment and all the other stuff. I've always been in different nonprofits, and that's how I've gotten a lot of my experience as far as being a leader. A lot of good and bad experience all comes with that, and so that's what really posed me for this. Two of the books I was going to give you, and I have a third one I'm just going to have you write down, is Creative Confidence. If you haven't read it, is a really good book. A lot of times when I join teams, I'll use these kind of techniques with my engineers or the people around me, marketing, sales. It's really a good way to bring that cross collaboration together in a different way. And my favorite leadership book is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. It talks about the vulnerability of leadership because it's a lot more human centric than I think most people think. The other book I really love is Radical Candor. I believe that's by Kim Scott. That is one of those books that really taught me how to speak to my employees directly. You know, not beating around the bush, but, you know, thinking about being radically candid with your thoughts and your opinions is actually beneficial on both sides. And I mentioned that I look at a lot of different design and business. I look at a lot of LPK. They're a really good consultancy that brings a lot of innovation and business together. So they're one of my favorite things to look at. Tips and tricks looking back. So how to land the job you're after. This is a little bit of a tricky question. So I think you really have to ask yourself if you want to be specialized or if you want to be in a general area. For me, I've always worked across multiple industries. You know, I've done toys, I've done packaging, I've done design research, it's sports equipment. I mean, I've done a lot of different things, and I've learned something so valuable from each of those industries that I couldn't have had if I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So that's really, I think, your personal approach to it. If you're really set on designing toys or being in a certain sector, I would tell you to go for that and to immerse yourself as much as you can. But the great thing about co-ops is you can try any industry you want, anything you're interested in pursuing. So my suggestion to you is be very selfish when you're picking those, because you've got an opportunity to spend a semester at a place. And, you know, when you get in the real world, there's going to be all these really great commitments that come around with being an adult, right? Having a wife, having a family, having a partner that you're going to have to think about when you change jobs, I hope, or at least consider them in that process. So, you know, you have such a good opportunity to try things out and see what you really like, because I really thought this, my second co-op, that I would want to do it the rest of my life. Got in it, you know, was about halfway through, and, you know, it was a good experience, but it wasn't what was going to fill my cup. It wasn't what was going to set my soul on fire and make me excited to come into work every day. So I would take advantage of all the different industries you like, and they may change. You never know. You're allowed to change your mind. As far as targeting a portfolio for a company, if you're really set on, like, I love when people show me examples of furniture, obviously, when you apply for a job at Burst Steel, because what I'm looking for is to know if the design you put on paper, you can build yourself, because then I know you've got really good technique as far as that skill set. And I also know that you can bring things to life and you've got the tenacity to see it through. And so that's a big component of personality that I'm looking for. So I would say that if you don't have a specific furniture to put, when you're applying towards a furniture co-op, is there something similar that you can put towards it that is going to show that same skill set? So, if you've done some sketches around ergonomic seating as far as cars go or transportation, that would be a really good one to bring over as well. And then how to market yourself. I always suggest to all our co-ops to set up a LinkedIn to start collecting referrals or start posting your projects or all that stuff. A lot of times when I'm looking through different people to hire, I'll go on there first. So I'll go type in Google and look for the things I'm looking for. So that's an easy way for people to find you. And it's also free. So, you can connect your website to that. And that's also a really important part about branding yourself, is always keeping a current website, always having your projects up there and having them updated as soon as you're done, because then it won't feel like that heavy task at the end of the semester. A lot of what I encourage my employees to do is to fail fast, fail forward, fail often. So what's great about co-op is you can put yourself in that position to find those opportunities all the time. And if you have a good mentor, they're going to encourage you to do this and to figure out what you really want. But I think you can take that in your life as well. There's nothing wrong with taking a certain path and deciding that it really isn't for you and making an adjustment and figuring it out. That's on you to fix and for you to change. Okay, so retrospect. Important decisions about my time at DAAP. I am so grateful for my cohort, because although we were very, very competitive, we were so close as a section too. And to this day, whenever IDSA International Conference comes up, we all try to go. We all try to have dinner one night. We have a Slack line. Every now and then we'll video chat with everybody. We got together over COVID and exchanged all our crazy hobbies. We got one guy in our class that was growing some microgreens in his closet, and another that was dazzling everything. And it was so nice to catch up with somebody, with all of them, because that cohort is going to be different than any other person and any other group that you meet in your life. The things that you go through and the tribulations and trials that you all are going through right now, that's really going to bond you in a different way moving forward. I was really grateful for IDSA. It helped me develop as a professional. So I would encourage you, anytime you have events, to show up for them, to do them. I had a lot of really good opportunities through UC. I mentioned I was on the water ski team, and that's how I got a lot of my leadership. I got a lot of different experiences that I never would have had I not taken advantage of them. And one of the best things that I can impart to you is that, learning to start over time and time again. Once the semester, the quarter ends, you start that process all over and you kind of scrap it all and you move on. And once you become a professional, having the ability to look at a project, to do the best you can, to show up with everything you have, make that critique, and then put it in a box and move on is going to serve you well in the real world. Because there's a lot of people that get really passionately tied to their projects and they don't want to see them let go. They don't want to see anything change. And you got to let go of some of that. You got to let go of the ego that's associated with that. What's worth stressing about? It's a lot of things I'm going to venture to say are probably not that important in 5 years from now. So the differentiation I would say to look at here is it temporary or is it going to be long term? Like I had mentioned before, there are some roles that look great but don't feel super great. And so when you're in those positions or you're in those roles, for me, that was always temporary. We were on a quarter system at that point. So I knew that if I could get through this hell week and I could get through these 3 more all-nighters, I could get to my crit, I could make my spiel, I could do everything I had to do, and then I could go sleep for a day and a half and do it all again after the next semester. And I loved having co-op and having DAAP, because typically the time I ran out of money, I'd come back and go to school, And when I got tired of school, I'd go back to work, and it was such a nice balance between the two. But knowing that something's temporary versus long-term kind of makes it a lot different. If you get in a position that you're really unhappy with and you're really miserable, temporarily, there's a lot of things you can get through. I think especially with COVID, a lot of people are finding that it's a hard place to be. But if you know that there's going to be an end to it, I think that kind of changes how you want to stress about it, right? Now, if you're in a position that there's no way out, you don't think it's going to change, or you're just not feeling supported in that, maybe that's something that you look at and you see, is there something I can change? Is there somebody I can talk to? Is there a leader that can help me? Seeing if there's something that you can do before you think of an exit strategy. And I particularly appreciated this question about burnout. Now, I can't say that I am the queen of not having burnout, because sometimes it does go too far with school and work. I think there was one crit that I actually, get out of here, slept for 3 days afterwards, because I hadn't slept for 4 before. I've become a much better professional since then, and I'm much better at time management. You don't know what you don't know, and I think that's the great thing about school and DAAP. But there's a difference between being tired and being exhausted to the point that you're not living your life anymore. So one of the things I want to teach you all about today is something I learned in Japan, called Ikigai. And I love this quote around it. The happiest people are not the ones who achieve the most. They're the ones who spend more time than others in a state of flow. And I will tell you that as designers, I think we are so lucky that we find that state of flow so much more often than the majority of careers out there. And that's one of the things I'm so grateful for being a designer, is that once I get into the groove of working with design, picking it apart, I'll look at the clock and it's 4:35 o'clock, and the day's just gone by. And it's that idea of flow that kind of is this essence of Ikigai. Ikigai is basically a reason to live, or a reason for being. It's the reason that you get up in the morning, and it can be tied to a person or a place, but a lot of time it's tied to activities and hobbies. And so I've got a list of kind of some of the concepts around Ikigai, and maybe a couple of these will go to you, or you'll relate to them in some way. Finding flow, remaining active, taking it slow, not worrying. All of these are really great on paper and hard to do in life. I totally can associate with that. Cultivating good habits like nutrition, nurturing good friendships, living unhurried, exercising daily. And I will tell you that in Japan, at 6 a.m., everybody is doing the NHK calisthenics. They don't think about exercising as running or jumping in the Peloton or doing a big weightlift session in the gym. I do this little thing every day that makes me feel good, that lets me move my body, that lets me live this life that I'm unhurried. And maybe it's walking the train station and back. Maybe it's doing some forest bathing in nature. It doesn't have to necessarily be you trudging to the gym, just moving your body in some way that feels good. And I will tell you that exercise is supposed to be something that feels good for your body. It's something that's supposed to be enjoyment outside of your day-to-day activities. Being optimistic, smiling. I think as designers, we're all inherently optimistic. So I think we're pretty good at that one. Reconnecting with nature, very important. Giving thanks, being resilient. Cherishing wabi-sabi, or the imperfection of life, knowing that nothing is perfect. And living in Ichigo Ichi-e, the present moment. I think Ichigo Ichi-e is one moment, one time, or one meeting. So, it's that thought that time is really ephemeral. This meeting that we have right now, we will never have it in the same atmosphere again. We may have other meetings like it, but it'll never be the same again. So just knowing that those moments that we pass out, we try to live in the moment as much as possible. Also, easier said than done. One of my favorite things, this is me and my husband in Japan during our time there, I sewed that yukata, which is the cotton version of a kimono. It took me, I think, 9 months. And for a person that used a sewing machine and had to hand sew it, I was a little frustrated that I couldn't use the efficient way, but I learned a lot from my sensei in those 9 months about life and sewing and all these bigger concepts. And one of the things I love most about Japan is their great appreciation for seasons, and Hanami is cherry blossom season. So it's really funny because a lot of people don't take vacation in Japan. They don't like taking any time off. They don't take any sick days. But Hanami, you'll see all these businessmen pull up these tarps at 6 a.m. And get a little area, and they'll sit out all day with their family and friends, drinking and eating and literally watching the flower blossoms come to the ground. And every year you can always count on this wonderful gathering and this camaraderie that you all come together and you do all these things. And I love that part so much. And it's such a beautiful thing to observe in Japan. In the fall, they have something similar where basically you watch how the leaves turn colors and you watch them fall down, but they celebrate with festivals. And so that's something that I wish we could find more in our culture is being able to celebrate those small moments and watching the seasons change. So if you're stuck at home, if you're stuck virtually, I hope you get to do some of that. And a couple of my favorite questions. The first one of which, being a woman in design. I would tell you that I am probably in the position I am now because I don't make it a thing. At some point in my life, I was in a position that was kind of a boys' club, that I was the only woman in a room, and I wasn't allowed in a lot of meetings, and I wasn't allowed sitting at the table. And that's one of the things that pushed me to continue my education, so I could be in those meetings and I could speak very well on the topics, and I deserved a seat at that table. And for me, that was one of those titles that looked good but didn't feel good. And I realized after a performance review that said I was very aggressive, and I'd asked myself, well, if my male counterpart would have gotten this, would he have been labeled as aggressive? And the answer being no, is that I didn't get any support from my boss, and it was time for me to move on, because for me, that was an environment that they were appreciating who I was and what I brought to the table. Because, in another company, in another project, one of the first things we worked on was a design with handholds, and everyone on the team was a man, and I was the only woman. And so they were all passing this around doing the handhold, and I go to grab it, and I'm like, guys, I know you all have great big hands, but look at my hand on this. We've got to think about the ergonomics around the other 50% of people who are going to use this. And I saw this light bulb go off and think, this is why we have a woman on our team. This is why we have some diversity. Now, and I guess along with that is, I'm probably in the position I am now, a lot in part to my father wanting a firstborn child to be a boy, which I am so grateful for, because growing up, I never was allowed to think that I couldn't do something because I was a woman, and I couldn't do something or was discounted because of my gender. For me, that was just a non-issue. And I remember pretty early on in my career asking him about this, and he said, if you don't want it to be an issue, don't make it one. If you ignore it and they invite you to that meeting, you're there on your own merit. You don't need to speak up. You don't need to go toe to toe. And that's something that I kind of struggled with in the beginning of my careers. Maybe I did come off a little aggressive because I did speak up as a woman and just speak up in general. But for me, that idea and that capacity and skill set to really listen to people and learn how to speak up when it was my time and when I had something important to say is something that maybe I had to learn a little bit differently. But my biggest tip is just to not make it a thing. I mean, even to this day, I'm typically the only woman in a room. I lead a team of all men. All my engineers are men. All my manufacturing tool and die guys are all men. And it's not a thing for them. So it's not a thing for me. I'm there on my own merit. So I'm really grateful for the position I'm in now. I don't really have a dream job that's this big title thing. For me, what I'm working on now is really interesting to me. I love furniture design, and I love the way that work and learn is changing. Outside of that, I also teach at the University of Evansville, and for me, that fills my cup in such a really awesome way, because I'm teaching business students how to think about design thinking and human-centered design and social entrepreneurship. And I really think if we could get our business students to think like designers, we would have such beautifully designed business systems, profitable systems that are solving these really big, wicked problems. And I think that's such a special place to be. So I feel like I'm really living my dream because I've made it, and I've kind of worked myself into it. You know, the thing I didn't mention is that my first real job as an industrial designer was not a position or a career option on their website. They had never heard of an industrial designer. And I had been on the water ski team. I had been in sports, you know, since I could walk. My dad really wanted me to ski with him and do all those things. And so I've got a huge passion for sports. And I literally knocked on the door and called them until they gave me a conversation. And then once we were able to sit down, I was able to show them what I could do, started to hire me and pay me, and had some really great projects there. And, you know, I wouldn't be limited to, you know, what is out there. If you can get a conversation started with somebody in that building, that's a really good ticket in. You know, there's nothing wrong with networking your way into a company. A lot of times you're going to find really great positions that are meant for you, that are organically driven. How to cope with a highly competitive school and work environment. Ooh, this one's a hard one. You know, I hope that your cohort is competitive but has a lot of camaraderie, because that's what our cohort was. And, you know, we were all going against each other for jobs, and all competing for grades. But at the end of the day, when crit time came by, we were cheering each other on. And if somebody had something that happened the night before, we were going to help them so they got their crit together. Because, you know, as a cohort, that we were our people. You know, we were our friends, we were our family for those 5 years that we were all together. So I hope that you can find some camaraderie in your current section. But I will tell you that the competitiveness that I probably have from sports, and I have a lot because of DAAP, is what really took me far in my business career so far. When I went to Japan, I had found this really great MBA program. And it was a 2-year program, but you could do it in 1 year. And I thought, great, I love a challenge, double dog dare me, I'll do it in a year. You know, did the application, got through everything, went to make the deposit, and I had a friend who was in the nonprofit with me that said, are you worried about failing? And I said, no, I'm smart and I work hard. Why would I ever fail? And she said, there's a 40% fail rate. What I had failed to remember is that the MBA program was modeled off of Harvard's case study business, that there was a 40% failure rate in every single class. And that's when my heart kind of sunk a little bit. And I thought, oh no, all that savings that I put for my MBA, I'm going to be against all these business professionals from all around the world. How am I going to do this? And I think my experience let me take a deep breath, work my butt off, show up to class, ready, prepared, and with a listening ear. And I think that's what really helped me graduate with honors in my MBA program. And it's what helps me look at the business environment in that way too. So I think the biggest thing here is DAAP is going to be temporary. That cohort, I hope that you know you're probably going to see them for the rest of your life. So I hope you all are connecting in a way that you're supportive, but you're competitive at the same time, because you're pushing each other. Because the further you all push each other, the better you are all going to get. And the better designs you're going to put out in school, the more you're going to advance before you start your job. And it's going to be a really nice push for you all. Aspects of design I particularly love or hate. The only thing that I really think is starting to go away is this higher class feeling that design is very expensive and that design has to be something with a really big price tag. And I think accessible design doesn't mean that it's cheap. It means that there are more people that can access it and that can have that good design. So, you know, a lot of the work that I do with social entrepreneurship and human-centered design, I think really shows that. And I think that's really starting to change. So I can't really say there's anything I hate right now. I just think it's getting better and better. Anyone I learned from most design career-wise, my cohort I learned a lot from. I have a lot of really great mentors. One who actually helped me change my major from fine arts to ID that I still call every now and then when I've got a big life decision, when I have something going on that I'm really grappling with. I'll call her, and every time I go to Chicago, we'll have dinner and we'll catch up. So if you have, a mentor that you work with, or around, your family or your school that you can tap into, please utilize that. They're going to be there and be supportive. I even cold called LinkedIn people that I was really envious of, and really was respectful of their career, and said, hey, I'm looking for a mentor right now. Do you have 10 minutes to jump on a phone call? I'd love to, talk to you about where I'm going. And I think you have a similar background to what I want to do. So I think virtually, this is a really great time to try something like that. So if there is a certain industry you're interested in, if there's somebody you see on a professional network that you just want to have a conversation with, ask if you can have a little bit of their time. People who are mentors love to give back, because typically we get as much out of the exchange as you get out of on the other way. So I would highly suggest doing that. Any tips for working remotely? I feel for you all so greatly right now, doing studio remotely, because I can't even imagine. I think the energy you have when you're all in studio together and you're throwing around ideas and you're doing prototypes and all that great stuff, you're just not getting it right now. So for me, that concept of Ikigai is like, how do you come back Monday morning with clear eyes and an open heart so you can hit the ground running and work your tail off, and then get through the week, hit your weekend, and do it all back again? So my number one tip is think about what makes you happy. For me, I love doing sports. I love doing stuff outside. I love, going out for a walk in nature. And I can't go snowboarding in Indiana every week, but you know what I can do is maybe go for a run on the weekend. I can jump on a bike. I can, lay in my backyard. There's little pieces of that. It doesn't have to be the whole shebang to give you some happiness. So I would think about what fills your cup, what makes you feel whole again, and see if you can access that. And a lot for me is also spending time with my family, which I can't do right now. So I call my family, we do a little face chat, we do cocktails, whatever it may be. I think you have to find that purpose outside of work that also makes you feel like a whole person again. And if you can, maybe jump on a Teams call while you're all working, so you get that kind of studio-esque experience without being all physically together. Also take breaks, get sunshine, get exercise, all those things I talked about with Ikigai. Moving your body is really important. For me, I'm in a stand-up desk right now. If you can make that happen, that is awesome. Ergonomics are so important at home because there's so many people sitting through all these Zoom meetings all the time, and we're so attached to all our screens. Do not sleep with your phone. Put it in the bathroom. Put it away from you, and try to signify the end of your day with something. Maybe at 5 p.m. you have an adult beverage or sparkling water, or you shut your laptop, you put it underneath your bed, and you put it away. And maybe you're going to pick it up at 8 or 9 when you're finishing your work, but some way to close it out, because there's this weird continuation with virtual work that feels like it's never ending. So if you can do that little action, or maybe you work out or take a walk or go talk to a friend after you're done, something that signifies that you're done with work for now, you're at least taking a break, then you can give your mental self some clarity, because odds are scrolling through your social media is not giving you that mental clarity. It's probably adding a little bit more to the problem, and addressing some of that and adding on to that some of that burnout. Okay, I think I've blabbered on enough. So if we have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything.
Yeah, Jacklyn, I have a question about, so at my first co-op, it was designing power tools. And so a lot of it was engineering, and there were a ton of constraints around that. And so they kind of treated the design as part of really just the first step in the process. And then we would still be in meetings with engineering and stuff all throughout the development of the project, but they kind of stopped taking our word for things or really valuing our opinion. So kind of how do you deal with that and make sure that your voice is heard and kind of your design intentions get put all the way through the design process, even if you have pushback from like engineering?
Oh yeah. Oh, I can relate to you on that. That's a hard one. So typically what I try to do is when we finish the design and we're at that point where we're like, yeah, that's it. That's what we're going for. I actually will put together like a little document that captures what it looks like, some of the features and benefits and where it needs to really go. And I distribute that out to all of our engineers. So they know the direction we're going. And that's kind of the emblem that they're supposed to really, strive for. And I've been lucky enough in my career that sometimes engineering will come to me and say, hey, are we still doing it justice or not? But a lot of my role now is making sure that we are holding up the design. So when you stop by somebody's desk or you stop by somebody's office and you're watching them work on something, it's not really going the way you had envisioned. Try to come at it with a listening ear and an open mind to say, hey, that's a really great idea. I had originally thought, that it would go this way. I'm curious, how did you get here? And maybe you can have a conversation around it, because it can't be this one-sided thing, right? Design and engineering, they really have to work together. And when they do work together, that's when you get the magic. And so, I feel like so much of design is put into a box at the beginning. And so we have to kind of keep bringing it up as a gentle reminder to say, this is the way we're going. Sometimes there's some compromises, sometimes there's some sacrifices. But one of my favorite quotes from my boss, our CEO, is, if you're not going to follow the design, why hire the designer? I mean, you're just throwing it out the door. You're wasting that time. But think from a cross collaboration and a functionality standpoint, you want to try to see if you can make those informal sessions so you can have a really honest conversation. And I would not beat around the bush with that. I would be straight and honest without being a jerk about it, right? Like, there's a difference between the two. So if you have something that you're feeling, try to say it in a polite way that's direct. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that got to the point. Thank you.
It's a hard balance, but that's why you're there.
I have a quick question. You talked about working a lot with cross-functional teams like engineering. Do you have any suggestions for how to kind of collaborate with them more than you've already talked about?
So I think it probably depends. Well, it depends a little bit on your engineering team, right? So at Versatile, I'm so blessed with my current engineering team because they love throwing around crazy ideas. Now with COVID, it's been a little tricky for us to all get together and brainstorm. So what I did is set up a Skype for us to chat, and I've just got the engineering team and our design team together on that chat. So what I do at least once, maybe twice a week, is I will find some really cool design or something really unique that's out there. I'll throw it out to the group and I'll say, hey guys, look at this. Wouldn't it be cool if we could figure out something like this? Or it's just hey, look at this design I found, and we'll try to talk about it a little bit. Because a lot of times those informal suggestions or those informal kind of, look how sweet this is, will get them talking and get them really interested. And then they'll start sharing their own ideas too, or their own cool things that they've seen on the internet. So I guess my number one option or suggestion would be, if you can find an informal way to do that, either on a chat or a thread or something like that. We do a lot of sessions. I actually schedule an engineering meeting twice a week, and we talk about some stuff going on in the company. We do a lot of custom work, so a lot of our conversation gets dominated by that sometimes, but we always make time to talk about the bigger things outside of that, or the cool things, or the challenges, or the opportunities. And so I myself try to make space for that each week. I also have a couple whiteboards that I have in our area, and I will put little design prompts on there. I'll ask a question and see if people answer me, or I'll start a drawing and see if they can fill something in. So for me, a lot of informal tactics seem to work pretty well.
Great, thank you.
So I know this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone here, depending on where our studio projects are at. But at least in my studio, we're at a point now where it's time to kind of pick our final direction and really run with it, which is obviously really difficult because you're kind of then committing to something. What is your kind of process for narrowing down all of your ideas to one, finalized direction with confidence to like carry it through?
I always need buy-in. I need buy-in from engineering. I need buy-in from manufacturing. I need buy-in from marketing. I need buy-in from sales. So I'm a lot different than you all because you don't have to necessarily worry about selling something to the world, right? But I think how it translates is if you can get some feedback from your classmates and get some honest feedback and some constructive criticism, they're going to see it from a different perspective because they're not as close to the project as you are. Now, a lot of other teams that I've worked on, I've literally sketched out drawings on index cards and set them out for marketing to choose and pick from, or engineering to choose and pick from. Once you get all your ideas up on the wall, for me, I always try to go through that first kind of weeded out period, because as designers, we can look at that whole wall and say, oh, yeah, this is a lot of really great ideas. Let's sift through them. I think a lot of other disciplines, they get a little lost in that ideation phase, or they don't really understand that iterative process. But if you can get some one-on-one feedback, that to me is a different kind of buy-in, because you've got somebody else that's in the process that's also kind of cheering you on through it and being your other, support in that process.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, what do you guys all use? Right, because you're all virtually, correct? Everybody is on their computer, Skyping into class, or how does this all work?
Yeah, so we do class over this Teams software. And then I think a lot of the studios have Miro boards, which is kind of similar to Monday, but it's more of like a big digital, cork board, I guess, for putting sketches and research and all that sort of stuff.
It's got to be really hard to get feedback on. So can you break out in smaller groups and get feedback from each other or share things with each other? Because that's what I've seen with a lot of virtual teams do. Rather than have the whole big team, sometimes it's easier with 2, 3, 4 people that you can kind of go around and do things in a smaller way and get some real dedicated feedback.
Yeah, I think we've been trying to do that, during class and outside of it. But like you said, it's still really difficult to coordinate that, especially remote. But yeah.
Well, could you guys have like a open studio time that you set up a Teams meeting and whoever comes, and if not, whatever? I mean, we had a similar thing for one of the organizations that I was in, that like from 9 to noon, we just had like this live stream that anybody could jump in. And once we were there, we could talk to whoever everybody was on and, get off when we needed to. But I found that to be a nice informal way to catch up with people, to kind of go back and forth. And I knew that it was like a similar time every day. And so if I could make it, I took advantage of it. And if not, or I could only come for 20 minutes, I came for 20 minutes. So I don't know if something like that would work for you all, but I don't know how you get that same collaborative feeling when you can't be anywhere close to each other, because that energy is so hard to permeate through the computer. I mean, I just imagine that it's very difficult.
Yeah, I'm all for that. So transportation studio, we'll start a call an hour early tomorrow.
Well, and maybe bite off a small part. Like, it doesn't have to be a big thing, right? Like, start off with like a half an hour, 45 minutes. I mean, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's cocktail hour. Maybe y'all get together and have a drink while you're sketching. I mean, it doesn't have to be this big thing, but at least if you can connect with each other, I don't think you can design in isolation. You know, even when we do product development, the good designs are the ones that we get feedback from the people using it. And I think the worst part about COVID is if you're doing a collaborative studio, you're not testing this with anybody. You're not going through an iterative process to get some feedback. I mean, I hope that you have a roommate that maybe you can do something with, or show off something to, and them give you some feedback. But you're going to have to find different ways to connect outside of, you know, that physical separation, because that isolation cannot be good for your process.
Do we have any other questions from anyone? All right, well.
Actually, could I ask something really quick?
You're fine.
Okay. I guess it's going off of that question. Like at Versteel, is the designer or the design team typically working like collaboratively with engineers as they're like sketching out ideas and ideating to make sure that it is feasible from like the get-go, or is it a little more isolated than that? How does it work?
It's pretty fluid. Even when we get an outside design, you know, I'm kind of the buffer between the two. And so I'll get the design, I'll try to pick it apart, how we can make it. But a lot of times our prototype expert and I will just try to build one right away. We'll try to put it together with our hands, because that's the quickest way for us to fail fast and fail forward and figure out what's not working and maybe where we can make some adjustments, because we don't want to totally lose the design, but there's always a little bit of compromise between production and manufacturing. A lot of times it's something around cost, or it's something around quality to make sure we're giving a good product. So, I think Ian had asked about reminding people of the design. Is I put that brief together and I have it in a place where everybody can access it. And I also typically show it on like my TV or have it hanging up in my office. And so when somebody comes by, we can chat about it real quick, and we can go, I can't tell you how many times I say, well, the designer's original intent, this original intent, this was supposed to be, and we find those little bitty compromises as we go through the process, but we always try to come back to that original sketch or come back to that. So if you can put it in a visible space or pull it out every time you're talking about it, I think you're constantly reminding people and bringing them in that process, because if you can explain the why the original intent was supposed to be that, not just, hey, this is the sketch I made, this is what we're doing. We want to preserve this part of it, because this really speaks to, the human side of this product, or this really goes in the biophilic element, bring that why along with it. And then you'll have a really powerful piece that's going to stick in everybody's mind that says, oh yeah, I can't get rid of that, fillet over there. It has to be a really nice organic surface. So I guess a little bit of that is telling that story around with that too.
Okay.
We're lucky that we go back and forth all the time, consistently, until the very end of the project and it's all wrapped up. We're still going back and forth with everybody in there. Very fluid process.
Yeah, that's nice. I wish we had that right now.
Yeah. So why can't you have it?
You're right. Why can't we? It's just going to take a little bit of rearranging of we've all established these patterns now of, working in isolation and letting that be what it is. But I think starting tomorrow, we could all call each other up and talk about what we've got going on and confirm.
But you're not going to grow if you're always comfortable. I mean, I think a lot of COVID has been, let's just get to a point where we can do it and get through it. We're on the other side going towards the end that we can do better. And so it's really making the decision that you want to step and do something better, because guess what? You got the power to do it, and you can do it with the flip of a coin or the start of a meeting or at any point in time. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to change your process, and you are allowed to change how you're tackling a solution or any kind of problem or whatever it may be. I give you permission. You all have my permission slip to make it work for you and get what you want out of the whole process in general. So paint the picture of what do you want it to be and figure out the pieces that have to be in place to get it there. It might not be exactly what you think it's going to look like, and that's not a bad thing either. But, you know, like embrace the wabi-sabi, the gift of imperfection, because we're all there, and just make it an accessible point that you all can really grow and benefit in that way, or at least in some way. We did a lot of cocktails and informal meeting during COVID. We didn't do a lot of work from home. We were pretty much back in the office. Oh man, what, like 3 weeks after our shutdown? But during that time, we did a couple COVID cocktail sessions or sparkling water, whatever that. I don't know if you're 21. You know, I need to make that disclaimer. If you're 21, you can have your alcoholic beverage or whatever. But the other people, I've got a couple other teams that did like coffee and conversations. That was really nice, where they all grabbed a cup of coffee and they would stick a design up on Skype and they'd all pick it apart and put it back together. And that was like a really nice informal way for their team to get together outside of their meetings, because typically your Zoom meeting, you start at 10, you end at whatever time it may be. You don't have that water cooler talk or that informal energy that you typically have when you come to a meeting. So I think in virtual worlds, we really have to be intentional about making spaces for that. So it's coffee and conversations. Maybe it's trying to think of another activity you can easily do virtually. I don't know. Maybe it's a dry run of your crit. I always love doing dry runs with our cohort. That helped me get all the bugs out before I got nervous and did it in front of a whole group of people. You know, maybe you do your 5-minute elevator speeches together, because I think that gives you a really good perspective on how you want to make that final presentation, and people will see something you don't.
That's a great tip. Good. Thank you.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Now, if you all are on LinkedIn, please send me a connection. I would love to connect with you. And if you all want to ask any questions about my career or anything else, Nick could give you my email or my contact information. I'm happy to speak with any of you all about whatever it may be. I just want to reiterate how important IDSA is and how great it is for your professional development, and how much you're going to look back in the future and be like, I'm so glad I went to those events and did those things. I think there's a Getting It Made conference this week that I think is $25. I actually signed up for it, so I'll be around for that. I love their little mini conferences. I think they're so great, and I always learn something really interesting from them. So go IDSA.
Awesome. Well, Jacklyn, thank you so much for coming tonight and putting together the presentation. It was all super interesting and informative, and a lot to digest. We can definitely take a lot of that with us through the rest of the semester and forward. So thank you.
Good. I'm so glad. Thanks for having me. Hey, y'all take care and take care of yourselves. Go do something outside. Drink lots of water. Find something that sets your soul on fire outside of school, and make sure you're doing that on a consistent basis so you fill in your cup as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all. Take care.